Whoa, can I help you?
Potato Man.
Where the hell have you been?
The Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989. Afghanistan has been described as the graveyard of empires. From Alexander the Great to the Mongols, the British, every nation that has sent troops in was eventually, inevitably, forced to withdraw in defeat. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan on Christmas Eve, 1979, and would be dragged into a decade-long war. But why invade in the first place? Back when the Soviet Union was first established, Afghanistan had coincidentally also gained independence from the British. Both governments were one of the first nations to recognize the other. The Afghans needed financial support, and the region made for a good buffer zone to any would-be attackers from the south to the Soviet Union. Over the next few decades, treaties of friendships and joint military exercises would be conducted. Unlike with other Soviet allies like China and Cuba, Afghanistan wasn't communist. Indeed, it was a semi-constitutional monarchy up until 1973. Ironically, relations only began to sour when a communist regime took over the country, with Mohammed Daoud Khan becoming its first president. For various reasons I won't get into, Khan attempted multiple incursions into neighboring Pakistan, which the Soviets didn't like, as it brought them dangerously close to war. Soon after, a coup led by Colonel Abdul Qadir Dagawal, who, after seizing power, went about establishing the standard communist dictator reforms, limiting freedom of speech, arresting political opponents, land ownership reforms, changing the country's flag, and, most importantly, establishing a very atheist-based political and social society. Many of Dagawal's laws that actually caused outrage amongst the Afghans related directly on what was seen as an anti-Islamic crusade, removing traditional practices, encouraging men to shave, even closing mosques. However, he also encouraged education for women and abolished forced marriages. The various factions, tribes, ethnic groups, and warlords in the countryside were very conservative, and saw these laws as Western-imposed ideologies, and agreed to unite against Dagawal and communism. The Soviets panicked, quickly sent in 100,000 soldiers, armed with the latest military equipment to quash the rebel factions. The rest of the world saw this, and assumed that the factions would be dissipated within a few months, maybe a year. However, the warlords used the countryside to their advantage, hit-and-run tactics in smaller convoys, suicide bombers, staying in hard-to-access regions, hiding whenever they saw a Soviet helicopter. If the Soviets took an area, the rebels would simply walk back in once the Soviets had left. It was impossible to win a decisive battle if the rebels wouldn't fight one. There's a reason this was called the Russian Vietnam. Despite this, the rebels were still suffering huge losses compared to the Soviets and the Afghan communists. Additionally, the Soviets were also killing civilians in untold numbers to suppress insurgency and prevent additional support. However, various Muslim fighters were supplying funds and weapons, and also arriving from overseas to fight in this jihad, including a one Osama bin Laden. Other countries who weren't too fond of the Soviets were also sending in money, weapons, and advisors to help train the insurgents to fight, including the CIA. Just so you remember, the CIA armed and trained Osama bin Laden. One notable weapon was the RPG, a rocket launcher that could be carried by just one man and could take down a helicopter. The rebel insurgents had feared the Soviet helicopters. Now, they can fight them. By 1989, 10 years after the invasion began, the Soviets saw there could be no victory. So, they withdrew and left their ally to be overthrown. Within a couple of years, the Soviet Union would break apart, and the anti-Western sentiments in Afghanistan only grew, leading to the Taliban taking power in 1994.